Got unban requests. I'm so confused. Unban requests. All right. I remember two of these guys that I banned. I'm actually gonna read these ban requests right now because that sounds like some fun. Have I dropped frames? No, I haven't. Okay. I won't pull them up because I can't be bothered. All right. So the first one was a guy who told me to go back to India when he got mad because I wouldn't. He basically threatened to leave the stream if I didn't drag him into Discord. And hold on one sec. All right. We're still navigating this. Let me see if the YouTube stream's up. Yes, it is. Oh, I am live on YouTube. All right. Let me just check the sound. Yes, it is. Oh, I am live on YouTube. All right. Cool. And then we'll tweet about it. And then we're going to read some ban requests to start off with some fun, I guess. Not gonna lie, you can probably imagine that today is gonna be an extremely depressing stream. Man, I really need to read the shock doctrine. Shit, I'm getting so distracted. Okay. Great. You know what? This is going to be like a freer kind of session because obviously it's my first stream back in months. YouTube link here. Let's get that YouTube link up. There's no one here right now anyway. Okay. So that didn't work properly. Whatever. Alright. What are we doing? Let's read some unbanned requests. These are from 3 years ago. I think it's just the format has caused them to show up as unbanned requests formally because of the formatting changes on Twitch. The first is from Tamir S57, who was a right-winger / right libertarian who threatened to leave the stream if I didn't bring them into the Discord channel and debate them live, and I didn't want to. And then I said something like, yeah, nothing of value is lost, or no skin off my back if you leave. And then they got really mad and told me to go back to India, so I banned him. They can go back to India. That I remember pretty vividly. I remember a lot of things. And, yep. So this unban request... Sorry I lost my cool. Please give me a second chance. And I was like, no. Oh, here are the messages. Okay, then fine. Fuck you. Good riddance. Fuck you. Go back to India. Coward. Go back to your own country. You not an American. Socialist, communist. Go back. Get the hell out. Which is exactly what an Indian would say to me. Like a Hindu nationalist would just say, go back to America. Go back to your own country. You're not Indian, which technically is true. But they'd call me a socialist, communist. The other was a was just like a kind of deranged, like alt-lefty, I guess. There is no civilization that can serve as support. We have to face our problems alone. The only prospect offered us as a counterpart of the cyclical laws, and that only hypothetical, is that the process of decline of the Dark Age has first reached its terminal phases with us in the West. Therefore, it is not impossible that we would also be the first to pass the 0 point in a period in which the other civilizations entering later into the same current would then find themselves more or less in our current state, having abandoned, superseded what they still offer today in the ways of superior values and traditional forms of existence that attract us. The consequence would be a reversal of roles, the West having reached the point of negative... I'm pretty sure they're copy-pasting. I quoted from a book. I know you have never read one. You are begging me to return. I am not having this discussion with you unless you read. And then he said, okay, go back to 0 viewers. So I was like, gladly. And I said, and I banned him. Jair Bolsonaro will bring Rizzo greatness. It will become the most important geopolitical power in the Americas. The U.S. is on the verge of a fall. That aged well. Jair Bolsonaro never ran against Lula. This is true. You're just too dense. I voted for Lula because I despise you Yankees, and I vote for Jair because he throws a spit at your values. You are a moron, not a mind reader. I hope he is a real fascist because it means a break from Anglo ideology. Yeah, America famously... never exhibiting fascist values. These are the mental gymnastics used for voting Biden. I believe in pragmatism and and then he starts quoting a book at me. And his unban request was his unban request is, I believe the reason you banned me was because you wanted to get an ego boost of some sort. I violated no rule of this channel. Well, fortunately for you, even though the current president of Brazil is not a fascist, in this channel I am, when it comes to my channel. And I can keep and kick out anybody I want. So, or unfortunately for you. Um, and then the last one's my favorite. This is Fake Bungo, who said, "Do you work at 7-Eleven?" Got banned, and then filed an unban request saying, "You're brown like my poo." And that was on Inauguration Day 2021. And those are my unban requests. They are all denied. Nope. I'm getting ego boost. I broke no rules of this channel. Well, great. So now I'm just going to go back to my Twitch dashboard. All right. So I'm back for now. Not a happy stream. Not happy for the reasons that I'm back. I felt like this was just the best vessel for me to make certain content, and the content is certain things that I've had on my mind, and I don't know the format in which I'm going to publish them. But I figured, why not just live stream the thoughts themselves, and then we'll cut it into clips. So, obviously it's too late in what's going on for me to summarize what happened. Like, we are in the midst of an ethnic cleansing, and quite frankly, like, what has repeatedly been referred to by genocide scholars as a genocide that is happening in Gaza right now. And right now there's a protest going on across the river in Manhattan, as there have been nonstop, and we've had record numbers and record democratic support for Palestinian lives. These are some of the biggest protests that I've seen in like my life. Occupy Wall Street was like, I don't know if it was bigger. It was definitely comparable, but it was also much more short-lived. It was less durable, partly because there were no like material goals to the protest, and also because like the media apparatus against those protests were a lot more. Just generally, the political apparatus against the protests were much more consolidated. The discrediting of the protest was much more effective, and the protest itself was a lot less effective. Here, there is a concrete, like, this is what we're fighting for, and this is what we're going to get, and that gives a certain purpose to the protest, a certain purpose to the movement. Of course, all that's secondary in terms of the movement's ability to gain momentum, and a pretty solid demonstration that like the country supports a ceasefire. Not to say that like a protest is always like a tiny point. It's under 1% of like the city's population, but like the fact that we're in the order of magnitude of, thousands of the city's population for protest is kind of insane. Something like, was it 300,000 people in Washington last week? That's wild. So yeah, that in a vacuum is very encouraging, if not for the fact that the entire situation aside from that is extremely discouraging. Right now, our president has engaged in overt genocide denialism. He has reaffirmed his commitment to do absolutely nothing to stop Israel from slaughtering Gazan civilians. Israel has killed over 11,000 civilians in Gaza at this point, or 11,000 people in Gaza, and has confirmed that 50 of those 11,000 people were high-ranking Hamas militants, which, let's do the math, is like 0.4%, I think. It's 4.4, yeah, like 4.44% or some shit like that. It is beyond the pale. There is no other country on the planet that we would so rampantly excuse this kind of behavior from. And the reason for that is extremely complex. The morality of the issue is not complex. Everyone and their mother has seen that, very easy, simple Michael Brooks soundbite, which, by the way, if you haven't seen the full 7-minute segment, it is a must watch. It is the title of the video is Michael Brooks takes a question on Israel-Palestine. And it's a 7-minute talk about just very clear cut. These are the ins and outs of why I have, unfortunately, he's talking about how much he supports Bernie's rhetoric on Israel-Palestine, which that part does not age well. But a very clear cut, like very morally clear, step-by-step process of why I believe what I believe on Israel-Palestine and why you cannot, in good conscience, get me to support what the Israeli state is doing to the people of Palestine in the West Bank and Gaza. And he goes through it. The clip that gets shared all across Instagram, it cuts off that it's not a complex issue if you look at it in stories, but if you look at the full video, he goes into like the thought experiment part where he basically says, just reverse the roles and ask what the world would do and say if a majority Arab population with the full backing of the Western world, or with the full backing of the United States, acted with total impunity on a small population of Jews living in the West Bank and Gaza, right? Which, from an ethnic standpoint, like that's exactly what Palestinians are, right? They are in a dwindling ethnic minority. Palestinian Christians are at extreme risk of being wiped off the map, of being totally wiped out, and it is an absolute existential threat, right? And yeah, if you follow me on Twitter, you know that I have been very unequivocal about, I think Hamas is a brutal right-wing fundamentalist organization at its core. Its manifesto has changed over the years to be less maximalist and less absolutist in terms of its desire to just completely destroy Israel and, more dead Jews the better. But obviously I do think that is a core part of their philosophy, and they are ultimately an organization with an ideology that needs to be defeated and eradicated. That's not something that can happen through a perpetual war on terror, as the U.S. learned over the course of the past 20 years. And yet we fail to actually apply that lesson to stop others from doing the same thing. And I've been unequivocal about, do you condemn Hamas? Yeah, sure, yeah. I condemn. I don't like the existence of Hamas. I don't think they're a good organization. I don't think they have good values. And I think that the killing of non-combatants is inexcusable, right? The targeted killing of non-combatants, absolutely inexcusable. And yeah, I've condemned the attack. I've even called out people for trying to defend it, of like, yes, there is a right to resist colonial occupation, 100%. There is absolutely a right to resist colonizers. There's a right to resist settler colonial states, and there is even an obligation to support resistance against military forces when it comes from organizations you don't like, right? The primary example of this is the Azov Battalion in Ukraine. Like, do we like the Azov Battalion? No, of course, they're fucking Nazis. But if they are helping Ukraine defend its territory against Russian military forces, I'm not going to sit here saying, I don't like that Russians are being attacked in Ukrainian territory because of the ideology of the battalion doing it. That's a argument for another time. In the same way, if Hamas had made an attack against a military target, it probably would have been strategically folly, in the sense that it would have resulted in the same kind of level of ethnic cleansing. Probably not quite so much, but like easily close to 10,000 people would have been killed by now if Hamas had attacked an IDF outpost, or some shit like that. But they didn't. They targeted civilians, they massacred them, and it was horrible. And now Israel is collectively punishing the Palestinian people. I even criticized protests that happened in support of Palestine before the Israeli military response, because I said this is basically what you're doing is you're essentially tacitly condoning the attack. And I stood by that criticism, but unfortunately, Israel's actions have retroactively justified those protests because what they did was they proved the protesters right? Which we could all have guessed they were going to do, but that is also a thing that happened. So right now what we're looking at is the systematic ethnic cleansing of a people, and I predicted that Bibi Netanyahu was going to grant a ceasefire, which actually is a 4-hour-a-day humanitarian pause, and the entire goal of that is to facilitate to actually ramp up the material and economic occupation of Gaza into a physical occupation, which is exactly what they're doing. They're setting aside 4 hours a day for a non-violent ethnic cleansing phase in which people in northern Gaza can safely evacuate, which basically means they're going to have to leave their homeland, which has already been razed, and they're never going to be allowed to return. I'm comfortable saying that. I don't know that, but I also know that, right? I'm not someone you should trust as an absolute authority on this, but even I know that. The function of Likud, it is in their manifesto, and this is another thing we'll talk about later, is it is in their manifesto that from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, the land of Israel shall be under total Jewish control, right? It is a Jewish supremacist, Jewish fundamentalist, Jewish ethno-state party, like ethno-nationalist party. They want all of historical Palestine to be under Jewish control. And when I say Jewish control, I mean Jewish fundamentalist control, right? It's not like they'd go giving that land to JVP. So that's exactly what's happening now, is 4 hours a day for Palestinians to voluntarily turn themselves into refugees before getting involuntarily turned into corpses. And that's what Israel is doing. So the 4-hour-a-day humanitarian pause, it is an ethnic cleansing pause. It is a way for Israel to say, it would just be easier if you'd go willingly, as opposed to us having to send you up. It's genocide. It is. Again, I'm not qualified to tell you that that's genocide, but people who are smarter than me, whom I trust to tell me it's genocide, have told me it's genocide, and I believe them, including genocide scholars. It's really fucked up. The history behind it is very, very complicated. The morality of the situation is not. And that is the marching line that I will continue to go by for the rest of this crisis. And it's what I have gone by and what I will continue to say. Let's talk about the military response. So when Hamas attacked southern Israel, they took hostages. That's the number I thought. I wanted to double check. So in the attack, Hamas took at least 200 hostages. And how many of them are still alive, we don't know. But I'm sure there are hostages who are remaining that are still alive. Members of the Israeli right wing have openly said that their priority is not the rescue of hostages, it is the eradication of Hamas. Which is essentially what they're saying is we need to kill them, and if we've got to blow up our own people to get to them, that is something we're 100% okay with. That is what they said, 1-to-1. There's no way around it. That is literally what that means when you say our priority is not the hostages. It is we are willing to kill our own people in order to kill our enemies. And I made this analogy, and it's really hackneyed to reference pop culture. And I'm not going to. I'm just going to say it's really interesting to see solidarity organizations like If Not Now and Jewish Voice for Peace, which are the two that everyone has heard of, Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, which is, I think, mostly a New York City-based one, that there is also there are groups of, there's a New York-based group of Orthodox, basically anti-Zionist Orthodox Jews. It's interesting to see the solidarity orgs, and obviously I don't want to place a false dichotomy between that and people who are literally willing to bomb hostages to kill Palestinians. But there is a stark contrast between the two, obviously. But the way that extinction trauma manifests in different collective mindsets, and the same event can change a person or a people's mindset in two very different ways, right? India is a great example of this, though India, that's not it would be folly to pretend that India's communalism all spawned from the British Empire. But there were people who understood that the defeat of British colonialism also had to entail the defeat of India's colonialism on the inside. And then there were those who believed that self-determination meant self-determination for Hindus or self-determination for Muslims, and the only way to actually protect that was to create an ethno-state. And the creation of an ethno-state and the creation of those hierarchies, the commitment to governing your new nation, this place that is supposed to be safe for all people, hold on one second. That's a ban. All right. The commitment to create a national identity through which all members of the nation can be safe. And the means by which to do that is to govern through fear, right? Specifically, the violent repression of anybody that you might see as a threat to the safety of your people. That manifests into a form of hierarchy, that manifests into a caste system, and manifests into apartheid. And I have a lot of bias on this because I come from India, where the caste system is not designed out of fear. The caste system is actually designed out of a pure desire for power, right? A pure desire to hold and maintain and protect power at all costs. And then the fear was used in a liberalizing and secularizing world in which the natural inherent adherence to those power structures was not surviving in a world in which, in an increasingly exogamous world. Exogamous is too specific because it specifically talks about marriage, because that's one of the biggest vessels through which caste is maintained and undermined. But through an increasingly pluralistic world, in a world in which the segregation of caste was not able to be maintained as effectively, as systematically, which it's not in this day and age. In order to protect that, the injection of a false fear of elimination or extinction was used to control upper caste Hindus and Savarna Hindus. Savarna is just the Sanskrit term for part of the internal caste system, as opposed to those who exist outside of the caste system, which non-South Asians know as the word untouchable, which is a problematic term. But like Dalit, Bahujan, Adivasi people who are indigenous, people who are from downtrodden labor backgrounds, anyone who is considered scheduled or super lower caste, right? Oppressed caste. the the use of fear of extinction, specifically on the part of Hindus, to create a fear by which said Hindus would ignore the empathetic links and thus cling to the power that they have, right? This was specifically designed to erode solidarity, and this is a function of partition, in my opinion. I could be wrong. A South Asian scholar could correct me on it. I have a lot of reading to do. But from the way I understand it, the Muslim fear of extinction during the time of partition, when there was already actually, I'll get to your question in a second. I just want to finish my stream of consciousness. During which there were already waves of violence, and there were already fears because the ideologies of Hindu nationalism and the ideologies of Muslim nationalism were already kind of spawning. But Muslims had a very strong fear of extinction because they were terribly outnumbered in the South Asian subcontinent. And Muhammad Ali Jinnah was one of the champions of the idea that Muslims need their own ethno-state. And then what happened was, because Muslims were going to get their own ethno-state, a bunch of Hindus started saying, well, they're going to attack us, like, we need our ethno-state, we got to kick all the Muslims out because they're all going to be Pakistani agents. So even the Muslims who wanted to stay in India, they were being pressured into going to Pakistan. And the fuck was my point? Yeah, so I guess my point is that the fear of elimination is what really codified those systems and created a system in which caste was not just about the complete domination of Hinduism and the Vedic religious structure over Dharmic religions in general, but also dominance over the Muslim populations, and probably largely with the end goal of the total elimination of the Muslim populations from India. Oppressed caste, indigenous people from indigenous religions and from, say, like Christian converts and people from Dharmic religions from the land, the end goal has typically been subjugation of those people. With Muslims, the end goal has typically been the removal, right? Because Muslims are seen as this invader. In either way, the hierarchy itself is the most important part. The power itself becomes the most important part, right? And that was always the most important part, which is why transgression has always been punished as opposed to corrected. Transgression is never corrected because correction implies what you're trying to do is you're trying to preserve order or stability. Transgression is punished. Even in the Ramayana, there is a story in which Rama goes to a neighboring kingdom and he sees a Shudra, which is someone from the servant class, attempting to live as a Brahmin, which is the scholarly class, the priestly class. And his divine duty, his obligation as a king not to interfere in the affairs of another kingdom, is superseded by his... I said that in a really weird Swedish way, but I don't know why. Okay, svensk. His duty as a king not to interfere in other kingdoms' affairs is superseded by his duty as a god to enforce the rules of the caste system, essentially. And so he executes the Shudra. So that is a clear... that kind of story exists in most hierarchical religious scripture. But the point is that he's not there to preserve order. He is there to punish transgression, right? And this is at the heart of what hierarchy is. At the heart of hierarchy is a desire to have and keep power. And the same applies here to Israel, which is why you hear so many people saying, which is why you see so many people putting up posters of kidnapped posters of hostages, mostly as bait so that they can film people taking them down and call them anti-Semites. But the truth is, I think most of the people putting these posters up are true believers. Like, they genuinely believe, but believers in the sense that, like, they're not cynical about it. They actually are, like, they are propagandized students mostly, who genuinely believe that unconditional support for the Israeli military is the only ethical option, and they are pressured by their families and communities with severe social ostracization into falling in line on those, right? But if you're interested in bringing the hostages back, you should be supporting a ceasefire. If you're interested in trading hostage, if you're interested in actually getting those innocent people back, you should be pressuring the Israeli government to accept hostage trades. You should be pressuring the Israeli government to allow humanitarian pauses for hostage release. But they're only allowing humanitarian pauses in order to continue the, so-called nonviolent ethnic cleansing of the region. The truth is, the reason Israel is not interested in saving hostages is that, and the reason that they're willing to kill 11,000 civilians in order to get 50 militants, knowing full well that with those 11,000 deaths, they're going to create at least 500, 1,000, 2,000 more militants in the long run, in the medium term, and in the long term, probably more. They are knowingly entrenching the willingness of Palestinians to turn to radical and extreme measures in order to resist occupation by showing how murderous they are willing to be and creating a perception of themselves to Palestinians that there is no peaceful solution to the conflict, at which point you are left with one recourse. They know that. And ultimately, one, it is within the power equation for, say, someone like Bibi Netanyahu, who wants Palestinian interests to be represented as radically and extremely as possible. It's in his interest because it plays into the fear agenda that keeps him elected. Netanyahu doesn't believe anything. He's not a believer in anything. He's a demagogue. And which is why it took so long for Israel to run a ground invasion. Was Bibi was basically holding back the military because he knew that a ground invasion was going to be extremely historically unpopular. Of course, there's no holding back. This is a military state, right? So ultimately, the continued proliferation of extremism in the region is to the benefit of the Israeli right. But additionally, even to those who aren't demagogues, but to those who are ideologues, the thing that you learn studying the caste system, like I said, is that the goal of fascists is not to preserve order. They always say that the goal is to preserve order, but that's a lie. The goal is to punish transgression. And we really come to learn how the human mind works with this kind of power and dominance, especially through the lens of someone like, I forgot the name of that dipshit CEO, who basically came out and said, we need to put America into a recession in order to discipline the working class. And the idea was, he couldn't stand the idea that workers were able to negotiate a living wage, that they had a seat at the table, they had the bargaining power in which to get wages that are commensurate with the dignity that they deserve as human beings, or that they are forcing bosses to share the winnings and the fruits of their labor with them. And what he said was, we need a recession. We need to go into a recession. The economy is starting to hurt, and that's a good thing, because what we need is to put these workers back in their place. And the reason that's analogous is that the truth is, the number one goal of people with power is not to maximize their own life worth. The goal of people with power who are looking to suppress labor movements, who are looking to suppress in ways that are actually just not beneficial to them. Starbucks is not, I don't know that Starbucks trying to flatten worker movements is actually beneficial to them. The goal of it is not to maximize the profit or the oh, sorry to hear that, Axlar. I'll get to your question so you can check out the VOD. Interesting your take me on spicy Twitter exchanges, but there's so much fun. The goal of political hierarchy, hierarchists. They are. What was I saying? The goal of people with political power in keeping political power is not to maximize their own outcomes. Their goal is to maximize the difference in their power versus the power of the people they rule over. So a system that lifts everybody up, that turns a 10 billionaire into a 50 billionaire, is not worth it. They will turn $50 billion into $30 billion if it prevents half of those workers from, gaining savings and being independent of their employer, right? I, as a CEO, let's not say as a CEO, because as a CEO, I'm not like necessarily a capital owner, though most CEOs are. But I, as a shareholder in a company, am, someone who runs a hedge fund. And this isn't true of everyone, but it's true of enough people, right? And the problem is that the system rewards this mindset. But I, as a shareholder in a hedge fund, am more interested in my $50 billion, not 50, let's say in my $2 billion being so outsizedly powerful that I can control the life of every single person who works for one of my companies, including the CEO. And if I was faced with the proposition of, let's turn your $2 billion into $50 billion, but it means that your workers are going to be treated better, right? If that was my calculation, I would turn that deal down in a heartbeat. I'm not saying I would, but your average shareholder, I think, would. Because at the end of the day, if you're looking to make over $1 billion, which is more money than you could ever hope to spend in your lifetime, and that's money you're never actually going to cash out, right? Once you've made $2 billion, that money is going right back into the market. Your entire goal in life is to turn that money into more money, right? At that point, it's a status symbol. You're interested in the power that money brings you. You're interested in the political capital of that money. And so if I have the opportunity to make more money that also lifts my workers up and eventually gives them the opportunity to be independent of me, why would I do that? I'm only in it for the power, right? And that's not me saying that's inherently has to be true, but it seems to bear out, because that's exactly what CEOs have to fucking say, is that they're willing to put the country into a recession. They are willing to put, they're willing to put pension funds in danger, right? Because those pension funds don't benefit them. They are willing to cause irreparable levels of harm. They're willing to cause harm to themselves if it allows them to stay at the top of the pecking order. That's what that CEO said, right? And the number one means of doing that is to discipline attempts of the people who work for you or the people who live under you to transcend their dependence on you, to try and reduce the level of power that you have over them. If they're able to do that, then the money that you have made is meaningless. You could have just stopped at $50 million. You could have stopped at $150 million. There's nothing that you can't buy with that level of money. But you went higher because you were interested in more than that. You were interested in power. You were interested in dominance. That's what money is, right? You're interested in the ability to go to a restaurant and not buy out the restaurant by cutting a check, but rather buy out the restaurant because they know your name. They know what you're capable of. They know what you can deliver for them. That level of power is what they're interested in. And that level of power is maintained through dominance, right? And things like caste and ethno-nationalist apartheid are no different. Ultimately, the interest of the dominant caste is not in protecting the individual people within it. Ethno-states don't care about the individuals of the ethnicity. They care about the dominance of the ethnic group. So in the calculation of this person came into my land and killed 1,400 of my people, and they took 200 hostage. A nation that is interested in the sovereignty and safety of its people would say, I will do whatever I have to do to get those 200 people back and avoid the deaths of more of my people, right? And the best ways to do that, obviously, are A, negotiate for hostage releases, and B, create vessels for alternate vessels for political representation in the region that it create a relationship with the people who actually have public support for this group, right? Unfortunately, wars on terror don't work, right? And obviously there's going to be military action, right? There is military action, and as a country with the most precise and state-of-the-art military technology in the world, you have the ability to mobilize militarily against such a force, minimizing civilian casualties. Now you're not going to kill everyone. You're not going to inflict the level of harm on, say, Hamas that you would by just carpet bombing Gaza. But you're going to drastically reduce the rate at which they're able to replenish those numbers because you're minimizing civilian casualties. Israel knows this, but their goal isn't that. Their goal isn't the eradication of Hamas. Their goal is the disciplining of the Palestinian people. When I say disciplining, I mean the punishment of the Palestinian people, not for killing innocent Israeli civilians. That in itself was wrong. What I don't think would have been wrong was Hamas attacking military targets. But if Hamas had conducted an equally successful attack on a military target, I think the reaction from Israel would have been the same. Probably a little bit less in terms of the civilian death and the carnage for PR reasons, but ultimately I think it would have been the same. And I wouldn't be surprised if in history I hadn't started studying the history until very recently, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were incidences in history where attacks against military targets were met with severe actions against the civilian population. Because the goal is not to eradicate the terrorist threat. The goal is not to keep civilians safe, which is why they don't care about the hostages. The goal is to punish the out-group for transgressing against the in-group. And it just so happens that a bunch of American ghoul politicians had the pretext to say, I'm just going to let them do this. Because this time, they actually took real damage to their civilian population. The civilian population, the civilian deaths were an excuse to go all out with this particular genocidal campaign. And it's really bad. And Hamas bears the responsibility for this in having made the choice to carry out an attack against a non-combatant population. They essentially created the pretext for the U.S. and the U.K. to give Israel carte blanche to start eliminating Gazans. Hamas bears responsibility for that the same way that the Israeli government and the Israeli state bears responsibility for October 7th. That they created the conditions upon which for Hamas to exist. And even, the current prime minister directly advocated the funding and political support for Hamas as a alternative to the Palestinian Authority. Because he knew that the only way to undermine the two-state solution was to destroy the credibility of the Palestinian Authority. Which they did, because, the PLO is essentially just a puppet organization for the West. Which is really bad. It's convenient for us, but it's really bad because what you do is you create a government that does not actually represent first and foremost the interests of the Palestinian people. So then the only recourse they have is to support the organization that's actually providing mutual aid in the region, right? They provide supplies, they provide education and support and food. This is what Hamas did at the beginning of their. This is the reason they were elected, was that they were an outreach organization, and they were extremely successful for a long time. And then they were elected, and the rest is kind of history. But they are a right-wing fundamentalist organization at their core, and they started acting on the part of their manifesto that basically says we cannot stop until Israel is wiped off the map, right? And the same way that radicalism falls at Israel's feet as much as it does at Hamas's, the destruction of Palestinian lives falls not as much, but like it falls very much at Hamas's feet. The power imbalance is still there, but so what's next? I've been thinking a lot about Michael Brooks lately. It's been like nearly 3.5 years since he passed. I really didn't agree with the guy on a lot. I mean, on most things we agreed the same way that I would agree with anyone left of center on most things. But I did not agree with a lot of his political prescriptions. But the thing that I always got from him was moral clarity and a baseline understanding of what it is that we're fighting for, right? A basic, what I call just a basic humanism underneath everything. And the willingness to align with anybody who does not compromise those values. And that's not anybody who always shares the same values, but anyone who aligning with whom does not compromise my values, and that you understand that this is my ideology and I will fight this way, right? There was a quote I saw on someone's Instagram story. It was akin to from a BLM protest. Here it is. Sorry, that's not what I meant to say. It was from an author during a BLM flare-up. This quote is from Brittany Packnett in a piece for The Cut in 2018, writing about the racist murder of a young black woman, Nia Wilson. May she rest in peace. And this was shared because Packnett's words also apply to the occupation and now genocidal actions of the Israeli state against Palestinians. I'm quoting this is from Mave in America. I'm quoting the caption. But the quote itself is, the most important step is this: train yourself towards solidarity and not charity. You are no one's savior. You are a mutual partner in the pursuit of freedom. Lila Watson, an Aboriginal activist and artist, once said, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. I want to be free. I want you to be free, and you aren't free till I am." This is a non-negotiable principle. If you're interested in social justice, if you're interested in actual justice, actual liberation for marginalized people and oppressed people, we can't have saviors. We can't have philanthropists. This is not a world that Bill Gates is going to save with some ridiculous experiment, right? This is not a world in which a billionaire thinks that they have the perfect answer to everybody's problems and gets to anoint themselves the god of this world. And if they fuck up, oops, That's not a social justice movement. That's a monarchy, right? That is it's an oligarchy, is what I mean to say. And a benevolent oligarchy is basically just taking a giant risk on the sustained benevolence of those in power and the inability of power to corrupt said oligarch. You're basically just saying, you know what, I'm just going to entrust my entire future to this person who has a level of power that has only served to corrupt every other person who's ever held this much power in history. It doesn't work. You can't do it. And on principle, it's bad, right? Now, if you came to me and said that was the only way to maximize the life outcomes for every single person, and you could demonstrate to me, or you could magically divine the knowledge, impart the knowledge to me that the other way is never going to work, I would agree. But this way doesn't work either. That's the thing. You put that much power into the hands of a person, eventually they're going to fuck up with it, and they're going to fuck people over. They're going to screw up lives. They're going to ruin an entire education system. The thing that has materially improved the outcomes for working people, especially for Americans, has always been more democracy in the economy. Always. It has been labor movements that precipitated every single massive improvement in American welfare. It has been democratic uprisings. It was broad-based movements. It has always been democratic power that preceded the changes that we actually sought, that were actually tangible and that preceded actual material change, right? And yes, it was government that passed those laws, but only under tremendous democratic pressure. So this notion of solidarity over charity is bedrock. It's important in every respect. It's important when we're trying to talk about the benevolent boss of like a national coffee chain with a 20% profit line that provides healthcare and dental and college tuition remission and, you know, a work-study program, an extremely generous employment package to all of its employees. But then when they try to unionize, starts taking them away. And when they take them away, they prove to us why we need the union in the first place. Because what they want, what Starbucks wants, is not primarily to maximize its own profit, is not primarily to maximize its own revenue. If they wanted to do that, they just grant the union. What they want is to control the lives of their workers. Because money isn't worth anything if it doesn't give you the power that you have. Or if you lose the power that you have over the people you lord it over. The money's worth nothing if you don't do that. That is the entire allure of profit, is the ability to define and distinguish yourself above other people. So the benevolent boss is not actually a benevolent boss. The benevolent boss is the person who, there are two different kinds of people who lord their power over you, who gratify themselves off their power, right? There's the person who self-gratifies in their power by using it to deny you your dignity. And then there's the person who gratifies themselves in their own power by granting you your own dignity and feeling like they are the reason that you get to live. That level of control over your life, they get to feel like the benevolent person because they're granting you your life. But in both equations, your dignity is the subject of another human being. That is incompatible with the social justice movement. Because what you're saying is our only recourse is to trust that person. And that doesn't work. That's not justice, right? That's submission. That's not liberation. That's not freedom. it is total subjugation to the whims of an elite. The same is to be said of a two-state solution. The dream is to return to 67 borders, to 1967 borders, in which a decent portion of the land is returned to the Palestinian people. In order for that to happen, you would have to expel tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of settlers who have since 1967 stolen land in the West Bank. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think there's any way that's going to happen. There has been too much land taken that we can just take all of it and give it back. The only way to have an equitable solution in which Palestinians gain the dignity that they have always deserved and always been denied since 1948, the only way is to give them the power and enfranchisement to fight for it themselves within a democratic political system. That means instant citizenship for all Palestinians. That probably means representation, or that probably means block representations for Jewish Israelis and for Israeli Arabs and Palestinians in parliament. What that would essentially be is, India did this, where you have caucuses whose job isn't just to unionize the elected members of parliament, but quotas of a certain number of elected officials whose entire purpose is to reflect different regions of disproportionately represented members of their bloc, or different regions that are disproportionately represented by their social identity, right? And unfortunately, it does seem increasingly the case that that is the only way in which actual peace and actual freedom is going to be achieved. You have to give self-determination to these people. And the only way to do that is to grant them democratic rights within the system where the power resides. If you try to draw another partition in which hundreds of thousands of settlers are going to be kicked out, they're going to fight, and there's going to be a war. At which point, all of Israel that is not in the West Bank is going to have to make a choice of whether to facilitate another, probably the hottest ethnic cleansing, hottest as in like a hot war, like the hottest war of ethnic cleansing that has been fought in history, or most likely to take up arms against members of their own family, right? And that is a choice that does not bode well for the Palestinian people. And the U.S. doesn't have a great track record on where they wind up fitting into that. So a one-state solution is the only way to go. Israel exists. It's going to exist. Israelis have lived in the land for 75, nearly 80 years. That's not a thing that can be reversed, especially because the world has not gotten safer for Jewish people, unfortunately. It's gotten safer than it was in 1945. But my point is, the world has not become safe for Jewish diaspora in a sense that any group of Jewish people would feel comfortable migrating to any part of the world, or that any part of the world would accept those migrants. So Israel exists as a nation, as a national identity, and it's going to. The question is, can we create a scenario in which neither of these people gets wiped out? Neither of these peoples get wiped out. Because if the Palestinian people are completely ethnically cleansed from the region, I don't see that boding well for Israel. Because I know there's a lot of people who will not forget that. I certainly won't. The right of Israel to exist is contingent on the continued existence and dignity of the Palestinian people in my mind. If they wipe out Palestine, I will advocate a no holds barred acceptance of refugees from the region, but not a cent of military aid. Same with the Iron Dome. You lose the right to the Iron Dome when you commit a genocide. And that's my anger. That's a very, very controlled anger of, well, we need to make the world safe for Jews. But an ethno-state's not the way to do it. And I'm not going to vote to protect a country that commits an entire genocide. So what I'll do is I'll vote to take the refugees in. But I don't know. I don't see an outcome in which Palestine is eliminated and it's not basically the end of the human species. It might not be that drastic, but and anti-Semitism is going to go through the roof. I'll do what I can to stop it, but I'm just one person. We're all just individual people. It's hard to be optimistic at these times. We'll talk a little bit about Joe Biden. Joe Biden's a piece of shit who is overtly engaged in genocide denial. He is watching an entire people get wiped out. And I think he thinks he's powerless to stop it. But it is insulting and disgusting that he has the gall to think he knows that enough not to try. Don't look at my messy bed. I'm in the middle of a cleaning period. It is disgusting that he thinks he can know that well enough that he is not going to make any kind of a stand against what is happening right now, that he is not going to have a moment of moral clarity about the carnage that is being inflicted, the slaughter that is being inflicted right now. When people ask me what I think about the prospect of voting for Joe Biden next year, the thing I always say is what he's done and said in the past month has been inexcusable. If you ask me to vote to send him to The Hague, I'd do it in a heartbeat. The same applies to most presidents, right? But every president who has existed since World War II has been a war criminal, has been a sociopath, and I would bet that probably somewhere close to half of them have also been rapists. If I have the power to make a decision that might prevent a genocide that otherwise would happen, I have to make that decision. 100%. If there's a chance. If I'm faced with the option of voting for literally two Hitlers, and one wants to kill 40 million people, and the other wants to kill the same 40 million people, plus another 10 million, I'm voting to protect the 10 million people. I'm not voting for the genocide. The quote, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor, is not understood properly in its full context. If you choose not to take action in a way that you know could save lives, you are condoning the lives that are going to be lost. That in itself is a form of neutrality, right? So in a vacuum, I would say choosing not to vote for either of two candidates, both of whom are terrible, but one is objectively more terrible and would do an entire genocide more than the other option, to choose not to vote in that election is to tacitly condone the genocide that would occur. Maybe that's not the best language that I would say it in. What I would say is to accept that outcome. It is a choice. It is a loud choice. It is a choice that to forego your ability to stop that. Which goes back to my bedrock principle, which is, if I have the ability to take an action that might prevent a genocide, even if it's a long shot, even if my influence is reduced, and the option that I'm choosing doesn't bring anything that is worse than what I'm trying to prevent, right? So, like, two constants that are exactly the same, but one wants to commit one genocide more. I will vote to prevent that one genocide. I always will, every single time. I have an obligation to do that. Because if I have the ability to potentially stop a genocide, I have to do it. If Joe Biden loses this election, it's because he failed in that very obligation. The same obligation by which I say you've got to vote to prevent the genocide of trans people. You've got to vote to protect the Supreme Court from being full conservative for another 2 generations. That same principle that I apply, that I purport to lecture people about, and I try my best not to because I don't think it's productive. That same principle is what Biden failed in doing this past month. He decided that he had no power in the situation as the most powerful man on the planet. And maybe he didn't. Maybe there was nothing he could do or say to prevent what is happening right now. Maybe withholding political cover. It's likely, actually, that Israel would have disregarded an unvetoed UN resolution for a ceasefire. And that the world would not have had the power to do anything about it. It's possible that getting militarily involved in order to enforce a ceasefire would have resulted in something even more catastrophic. Because you are dealing with a fundamentally untrustworthy, yet still nuclear military, right? It's possible those were the case. It's also very plausible that any threats that were made in private phone calls were bluffs designed to get the U.S. to comply. When Biden failed to do whatever he could to facilitate and to validate, to vindicate the immense amounts of global public democratic pressure as the president of one of the only Western countries, one of the only countries in the global north that is not clamping down through the federal government on protests, because the U.S. is unique in its stalwart commitment to free speech, something we've criticized historically but are now seeing the benefits of. When he chose not to vindicate that public pressure, he probably lost the next election. That's at his feet. I will continue to say that if you can vote in a way that will potentially prevent a genocide, you've got to do it. I don't care whom you're voting for. It doesn't matter. A vote is not a reflection on yourself. A vote is a choice to exercise what little power you have to prevent what little harm you can. That's all it is, right? But that's not going to be effective. It's not going to be effective because the level of hatred that Biden has created for himself is not something that I can rewire. And the level of hatred toward him is deserved. The level of anger toward him is deserved. And the more it is, the more entrenched it is going to be in people's minds that they shouldn't or don't need to vote for him. That they'll think that not voting for him is some principled stance. I don't think it is. I don't think your vote matters that much. I think if you're really interested in taking a principled stance, you got to find a primary candidate and stick to them. Which brings me to my next point. I think I'm coming around to the notion that the Democratic Party needs a succession plan. And I'm not talking about 2028. I mean, the Democratic Party needs to find a candidate who is willing to run against Biden. And Biden needs voices in his ear saying, you're not going to win this election. Unfortunately, the political consultancy in the federal Democratic Party is more interested in keeping their careers than they are in keeping the White House. And yes, that includes even when the potential end of our democracy is at stake. So this is the problem, is that Democratic operatives, for fear of their jobs, are not going to tell Biden to drop out of the race. As a result of which Biden's not going to drop out of the race because he's not going to come to that realization himself if he still thinks he can win. There's no reason for him to believe he can't, because he in his mind, he beat Trump once. And if there's one prerequisite quality in a presidential candidate, it is narcissism. So he's not going to drop out, but he needs to. And I don't know if he can win. I really hope I'm wrong. But he has alienated some key votes in some key states. I don't know how he wins without young voters, and he's not going to get young voters back. And I'll have that conversation. I'll say, yeah, he's a genocide denialist. I don't deny it. The thing that I don't want you to do as a young voter is I don't want you to make a choice that leads to a president that does worse to us, not to us, especially to you, right? This is the thing that I have said to Muslim friends of mine who have said, I just can't vote for Joe Biden. How can I vote for Joe Biden? And the thing I say is like, I can't possibly tell you how. I can't tell you. I can't tell you to do this. Yes, I'm going to be affected by the Islamophobia. Of course I am. Because I'm brown, like we all are. But not nearly as much as you. So I can't tell you to vote for Joe Biden. What I can say is my biggest fear is that in the choice not to vote for Biden, an outcome occurs in which we, or God forbid you, because I certainly hope we're in this together, a choice in which you become a second-class citizen and you look back and think there was something I could have done to stop it. That's the thing I don't want you to have to live with. I always, and that's my line of reasoning, right? Is not you've got to vote for Biden. Is just make sure whatever you do, the immediate thing is, can I live with myself voting for Joe Biden on what will be November 7th next year, right? Election day was November 7th this year, which means it's a leap year, November 8th. So the day after Election Day is November 8th next year, right? So people say, can I live with myself? I can't live with myself voting for Joe Biden. I won't be able to feel good about myself the next day. The question is, are you making a choice that you can live with 6 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now? I'm making a full-throated push of advocacy for a people that I don't think I can help. I'm not optimistic. My feed is full of stories of children being martyred, of kids bombed in their sleep, stories of children quivering, covered in soot, because their parents are dead and they don't know where to go. They are too scared to cry. And I cannot look away. And I don't think I can help them. I'm watching the only person of Palestinian descent have a witch hunt against her, while she exhibits the kind of moral clarity on this issue, on every issue. Full-throated advocacy, not only for Palestinian lives, but for Jewish lives as well. And being punished for it, not for her speech, but for the color of her skin. While she continues to say that the dignity of an Israeli and Palestinian life are the same to me. And that's what fuels my advocacy. And tells the story of kids who were killed on October 7th in the same breath with which she talks about her people being martyred. And she is being turned into a second-class member of her legislature by a fundamentally ethno-nationalist project in our country. A concerted effort to import the ethnic cleansing happening in Palestine right now to our country. Members of the Republican Party saying it is time to kick Palestinians out just for being Palestinians. It's time to deny them entry into the country. Brian Mast still has not been censured in Congress. And I am watching this person be burnt in effigy, and she holds her head up high. And there's probably a strong suspicion that this is going to be the end of her people as she knows it. That she is going to lose so many loved ones. And I don't know that we can stop it. But the reason I do it is that if in 20 years my child, or in 30 years my grandchild, or my nephew, or my niece reads about this, knows I was alive during it, and looks at me and says, "What did you do to stop this?" I would rather lose sleep for the next 3 weeks than not be able to live with myself at that point in 30 years. That's the choice I'm making, right? And that's the same thing that I will say to anybody who says, I don't think I can make this vote next year. I will say, if you can't live with yourself for making this decision in the short term, I understand that. Just make sure you can live with yourself for the opposite decision if things go further south. Make sure you can live with yourself 20 years from now. Always pick that. Always pick that. Make sure you'll be able to sleep at night in 20 years, and that you won't have to lie to yourself in order to do it. That's what I have to say. And that's why I can't sleep. I got sleep a couple nights ago. I got a solid 6 hours. It was my first 6 hours uninterrupted in 4 weeks. It's the only night I've had. Hi, the Amazing Wolf Skeptic. How's things? They're really bad. I'm relatively doing okay. But things are not good. All right, Ashler, I'm going to read your question if you're watching the VOD. So, is the caste system a big part of the reason arranged marriage is so ingrained in culture? I do not have the answer to that. I do not, for the life of me, have the answer to that. But also probably. Arranged marriage is definitely... It's not... I wouldn't say caste is the reason arranged marriage is ingrained. I would say that arranged marriage is a fantastic... and... probably the number one vessel. Yeah, arranged marriage is the number one vessel for maintaining caste endogamy, and caste endogamy is the number one vessel for maintaining caste. So I don't think caste is the reason arranged marriage is so. Actually, I'm not gonna say I don't think. I don't know that caste the caste system is the reason arranged marriage is so ingrained. But what I do know is that arranged marriage is one of the foremost, if not the foremost, method of protecting caste, because caste endogamy is key. There's a reason that Ambedkar in his speech, the number one thing that he talked about, two things as the main ways of undermining caste, and the number one was caste exogamy, was conducting marriages between, specifically between privileged castes and oppressed castes, between the untouchables and the caste elite, now referred to as Brahmin Dvija or Brahmin Baniya, but like generally people from Brahminic or Vaishya castes, so like the priestly or merchant castes, with people from the menial caste or from outside the caste system, or avarna, which is what is colloquially referred to as untouchable. We've talked before. Yeah, I recognize your name. I don't know the context of our conversation necessarily, though. Yeah. Yeah. This is going to be a tough year, because my views on voting haven't changed. But I'm going to have to find a way to advocate those views while saying this fucker's name as little as humanly possible. Because what he's done and what he said is so unconscionable over the past month that I think every time I say his name, I'm going to lose people with my argument. So the thing I'm going to say is, just make the choice that you can live with 20 years from now. Don't think about November 8th. Think about 2032. Think about 2040. Joe Manchin's retiring, which means there's a very good chance, it is looking more and more likely that the Democrats are going to lose the Senate next year. Or that medium case scenario, if we're able to hold every seat, save for maybe one. I can't remember. It's 51-49 right now, right? Yeah, in which case it would be 50-50 if we hold every seat. If we hold every seat and lose the White House, if we hold every seat in the Senate, make no pickups, and lose the White House, I think it will be the end of American democracy. I'm trying to think of a Republican who won't vote for I don't know. It could be. I think it genuinely could be the end of American democracy. And the reason for that is that a Republican president and an effectively Republican Senate, that means a 50-50 Senate with a Republican president means a Republican vice president who is the tie-breaking vote, will be able to nominate and confirm Supreme Court justices. And if that's the case, there are 3 members of the Supreme Court who are over the age of 65. And SCOTUS has a conservative majority of 2. John Roberts may not retire under Trump. In fact, I would actually bet he wouldn't, because John Roberts is like a weird institutionalist type, and I think he genuinely does believe in the sanctity of the court. But Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas will retire. If Donald Trump wins the election, and Donald Trump's going to be the nominee, if Trump wins the election and there is not a miracle in the Senate, we lose the Senate, at which point Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito will retire. They will be replaced by two justices, I shit you not, who will be my age. They will be my age. I hesitate to say they would even be 40 years old. I think they're going to be my fucking age. I am 30. They're going to be replaced by two 30-year-olds who just passed the bar but have been Heritage Foundation clerks for, since college. They'll be believers. And those will be the judges confirmed to the Supreme Court. And a Republican Senate will vote for them because they genuinely believe that Clarence Thomas should be replaced by another Clarence Thomas, and Sam Alito should be replaced by another Sam Alito. And that's the excuse that Susan Collins will make. That's the situation we're in now. Is that at any point, if Republicans hold the presidency and the Senate, it's basically game over. You will have a Supreme Court that will continue to wage war on the American people and will slowly chip away at democracy. And we have to prevent that. It's not an option. We don't get to sit this one out. History's not predetermined. A lot of people say we're living through the death of an empire. Maybe we are, but it's not predetermined. Could happen. Might not. It might. There's a lot of really encouraging shit going on that could be the start of something very, very, very promising. But the decisions we make in the next 2 years as a country will have the power to completely smother all hope that we had to turn this country into something workable. Yeah. I don't think democracy would end instantly. But if you have a court, but what we're looking at is a Supreme Court potentially where the oldest member of the court, who is a tiebreaker, so not counting Roberts because Roberts is the sixth vote, the oldest tiebreaker member of the court would be Neil Gorsuch, who's in his 60s, early mid 60s. And that's really fucking scary because Neil Gorsuch is also radical, right? Which basically sets this insane, extreme right-wing court as the new baseline for American democracy. Which means from there, we're going to have to fight back from there. But you get that court, even if we win the House, we lose the House in 2 years. I think there's going to be an onslaught of state governments fighting it. There's a lot of things to be hopeful about. Maybe state governments are able to be clawed back by Democrats. And there's a lot of great state parties that are doing a lot of great work. But the Supreme Court are the unelected high priests of our country. They have the power to do whatever the fuck they want, essentially. I struggle to see something that the Supreme Court doesn't have the ability to do. Because the people who determine what is in the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court are the Supreme Court. They're the ones who they decide what their powers are. So this is an election that we can't afford to lose, and I think Biden has lost it. And the only thing I can say is we have to prove me wrong. I'm not the only one who thinks that. We have to prove a lot of us wrong on that. We have to. We have to. Like, this isn't. There's no otherwise. There's no otherwise, right? There's no candidate who's willing to step to Biden because there's no candidate who doesn't want to run in 2028. But, like, what's going to be left in 2028? We need someone to step up and run against Biden. We need someone to put pressure on him to step aside, or put pressure on the administration to make decisions that might actually win back voters. Though I don't know what that's going to be. I don't want to be doomer. I'm a little doomer right now. Shouldn't change anything we do. Still, what we do is the only thing we can do, which is the best we can, right? I don't think my actions can stop a genocide, but it's not going to stop me from trying. It's the same calculation here. I don't think my actions can stop a genocide in next year's election, but it's not going to stop me from trying. Cool. Um, 1.5 hours. Damn. All right. It's a hefty stream. Maybe I stay live for a bit. Do some surfing. Let's check out this Counter-Strike. I have not played Counter-Strike 2 yet. I'm going to try running it for the first time with stream on. Counter-Strike Global Offensive. That's not a real game. All right, let's see if I can get this running. Aw. That was so sweet. I got a very sweet message. What are we doing? I am... All right, so I've got to take this CSGO scene. Convention surf BG? No. Surf. Where's surf? Is it just CSGO 2? No, that's Get that out. Get that out of here. CSGO? No, that's gross. Where's the good stuff? Me with BG. CSGO 2, casting CS. Val, me with background and edge. Bro. No, that's casting. I guess CSGO 2, and then what we'll do is we'll just change CS to Counter-Strike 2. That did not work. Counter-Strike 2 does not want to be captured. Oh. Properties. May require the allow third-party software. That's it. Okay. So that allow third-party software. Okay. So let's bring it back. Manage. General launch options. Allow third-party software. Play. Very cool. Let's check that my mic's not clipping. No, it's not. Like, hold on. There it is. Yes, let's go. Okay. Now I have to find the KSF servers. Presuming those still exist. Practice workshop maps, private matchmaking, community server browser. Source. Global offensive. Retakes. Okay, server name. You know what? Actually, what we can do is we can just go to the website. Go straight to the source. Oh, there's no surfing in CS2. Is that right? Let's see. Let's find out. Maybe they just maybe they just don't have. I don't see why they wouldn't have a surf. KSF wouldn't have a surf server, but I guess we'll find out. Surf. See all, server not full, has users playing. Wait, select game. I have to select game. Counter-Strike 2. Look. Oh, there is. Alright. Let's see if there's a KSF. No, there is not. Well, let's go to 24/7 Kitsune. No, I do not. Let's find a beginner server. No, I want a skill server. Timer. What are these 24/7? Give me a rotation. Let's get something with an English server name. Actually, Polish also is fine. No, it's like 100 latency. Mesa timer top list. CS2 Surf US. US. Surf Boomer. Okay, I guess it's Surf Boomer. Allow. Okay. open my chat. Let's go to restream.io, and then I've got to.
Why is this so hard?
Let's turn off
My
voice
cock or
enable.
the map?
Because I know what. What? Oh, wait, hold on. Voice. How do I turn off voice chat? I don't want any gamer words. Please, no gamer words.
I don't know how you guys are like changing direction midair.
And death camera, music, round start, VoIP, enable voice. It's not, it's my voice. I want to disable other people's voice. I want to be able to talk, I just want other people to talk. Okay. Voice enable in CS2. Voice mod enable. Okay. Cool. All right. Let's try and just do this without binds. We're not going to do this without binds. This is so silly. I'm logging it. What? Make me captcha. Oh, it did. Nice. Where's my chat? Here it is. New comments will display here. Very cool. Alright. So, we're going to bind mouse 2. Or wait. Plus attack. No. Mouse 2 plus right. Bind mouse 1 plus left. Oh no, they changed it. Bind mouse 1. Yaw. Let's just go back to plus attack. Bind mouse 2 plus attack 2. There we go. Okay. Let's just do bind M wheel down plus jump. Do that. There we go. Okay. That's good enough for me. Alright. I don't have any of my reset binds. Stream recordings for free for the next 7 days. That's very cool. Very nice. Oh, there's telewarping. That doesn't really help me. Yeah, let's just go at this speed. Man, I haven't done this in forever. You know what? Let's try this game. Diffuser group Sigma. Where'd it go? I know all these maps.
Let's roll.
Alright, you know what? I'm going to call it on stream and just try out this game. Peace.